Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Stay at Home. My name is Bhaskar Sankar. I'm the editor and publisher of Jacobin magazine. And since the start of this pandemic, I've been joined several times a week by a left-wing thinker who's been making argument, or I've been doing an interview with them for around 45 minutes or so. Then normally we've been doing a Q&A afterwards. So please log in, press like and subscribe, participate in the chat. And, pressing like and subscribe is the way that we get these videos to more and more people. So we really appreciate the reception so far. Jacobin's YouTube base has gone from almost literally 0 to close to 30,000 subscribers. I know tens of thousands of people are watching the videos on Facebook too. So please, that's our only ask. Non-monetary ask, just press like and subscribe. On Wednesday, we have a great lecture on the origins of postmodernism and why the shifts within academia in the 80s and 90s were by and large a detriment to the left, to building a materialist left, a fighting left, a left that's committed to socialist ideas. And on Friday, we're doing a talk about anti-communist massacres and their history, particularly in Indonesia and elsewhere, histories that you often don't get told about in textbooks. But, they left a really huge body count, and the United States has its fingerprints all over it. Today, we don't have a lecture. We have an interview. I'm pleased to be joined by Howie Hawkins. Howie, for those of you who don't know, is a longtime socialist. He was a member of the Socialist Party of America. He was a member of the left wing of the party, the Debs Caucus, that went on to found the Socialist Party USA. The center, of course, became DSOC, the forerunner to DSA. The right wing became Social Democrats USA, but we really don't have to talk about Social Democrats USA. They had quite an ignoble trajectory. Howie's also the Green Party presidential candidate for 2020, but he's been a founding member of that party since 1984. He's run a bunch of spirited campaigns in New York, headquartered out of Syracuse, where he lives. He's run campaigns for Senate. He runs campaigns for governor that have really, really went way beyond expectations. So this is someone with a long history. He's running as a third party candidate, a long history of punching above his weight. And just to give you a little flavor, it's not an endorsement, just to give you a little flavor of what kind of policies he's running on, we have a little ad that we're going to play that'll just give you a sense of the Hawkins platform for 2020. And the idea is he's really trying to get in circulation this campaign.
We can't go on living with capitalism. It's a system of endless growth, and it's killing the planet. It produces products without accounting for the environmental costs. And the whole system is based on exploitation. It exploits us as workers. We get paid a fixed wage, and all the surplus value we create goes to the owners of capital. The same attitudes and institutions that justify the exploitation of people are extended out into our regard for nature. This is more than just about heat waves and stronger storms. It's about ecosystems collapsing, agriculture collapsing, and with it, the basis for our civilization. We're calling for a socialist economic democracy so we have the power to choose how to produce for our basic needs within ecological limits. The Green New Deal we're talking about is both a green economy reconstruction program, redoing not just electric power generation, clean energy, but all the sectors of production, agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, buildings, so that they all are run by clean power. And then the Economic Bill of Rights, rights to a job, to an income above poverty, to a decent home, comprehensive health care, public education from cradle to grave, and a secure retirement. These things ought to be guaranteed by the government for people so that we can have a just transition. We can't rely on the Koch brothers and Exxon to reinvest their profits from fossil fuels into renewable clean energy. They're not going to do that. So we've got to take them over and have a public energy system. And we got to move fast because we're running out of time. What we need is something on the scale of what we did during World War II, where the federal government either built or took over a quarter of manufacturing capacity in order to turn industry on a dime into the arsenal of democracy that defeated the Axis fascist powers. We need nothing less to defeat climate change.
All right. So Howie's clearly making a pitch at a very different level than Trump and Biden. By the way, Donald Trump and Biden are welcome to join us on the Jacobin YouTube as well for a critical interview. But Howie, it's been a while since I've seen you. Obviously, we ran into each other many times over the year in socialist circles, and especially in New York. Full disclosure to everyone watching, I was a supporter of Howie's campaigns in New York for both Senate and his governor campaigns. But how are you doing? How's been the experience of campaigning during a coronavirus crisis where you can't get out there and do the usual sort of events?
It's been good, actually, because I've actually reached more people, on these Zoom and Skype. And, when I'm traveling, barnstorming around the country, I'm spending half the day traveling, driving halfway across the state, flying halfway across the country. And then you got to find people where you're going to organize a meeting, find a place, notify the media, notify the public. Now we've been doing it online. So I've been able to basically have question and answer sessions with all the state Green parties as they went into their primaries. A lot of meetings with refugees from the Sanders campaign. There was a period there like every week, we got another cohort. First, Bernie got his butt kicked in Super Tuesday and then Big Tuesday. Then he dropped out and then he endorsed Biden. Each time there was a lot of Sanders people wanting to talk to us. So it's worked out well the last couple of months. Although I have to say, I do miss being on the road and meeting people. And one of the things you can do is when you're a presidential candidate, even a Green Party candidate, and you go into a place like Wichita, Kansas, which is probably a safe state for Trump, it's news in Wichita and I can get coverage. So how we do that online, say in Wichita, we haven't figured that out yet. So I'm not sure whether we'll go back out on the road going forward, but we'll have to see. We're very concerned about the public health implications of doing that. And it's a big issue for getting on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, some of the areas where you resonated most in your New York State campaigns were areas like Syracuse, like Rochester, like Troy, New York, where I know you done some events with our comrades in Troy and that area. But areas where the Democratic Party has really given up on campaigning and winning overvotes, and there's kind of a political vacuum. And obviously, when it comes to not very engaged voters who have been left out, it's hard to reach them online. But I take your point about being able to reach activists, at least in the early stages, digitally. But I want to maybe start with a little bit of your early history. You've been a socialist for a long time. What drew you at first to the Socialist Party of America? How did you become involved in the Green Party? Let's maybe start with those two things: your history as a socialist and how that kind of led you to the Green Party. I should say that, of course, you're still a socialist today.
Well, it was civil rights. I have cousins who are the children of one of the first Japanese war brides out of World War II. And they're in the Army, or their father was, and they're stationed in Virginia. And as we're the same age, and as the oldest cousin and me were headed for kindergarten, I learned that they want to send him to the colored school. And I just thought, at 5 or whatever I was, that was so wrong. And it just, it was family, it was blood, it was wrong. And so that was an issue that concerned me. As it turned out, they got restationed in Germany, and we didn't have segregation in California. So the kids that I was coming up with, Black, Mexican, lots of different Asian and Pacific Island nationalities, we all went to the same schools. But it was a big issue, and it was the 60s. So 1964, now I'm 12 years old, and Reagan is campaigning against the Rumford Fair Housing Law that had just passed for a referendum to repeal it. And the Republicans were able to do that. So I'm saying, and my family was Republican, and they said, we're the party of Lincoln. We believe in civil rights, but apparently not. So I'm looking at the Democrats, and they had a choice between the Dixiecrats, segregationists from Mississippi, or the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had organized. And Johnson sent Mondale, Humphrey, Joseph Rao, the liberals, to tell the Freedom Democrats they had to wait. And so I'm 12 years old. Where's my party? Because I'm not with either of these parties. And then, the lesser evil won, Johnson, and they immediately escalated in Vietnam. Now we got another big issue. And then this may not
resonate with younger folks, but we had a postal banking system back then. That's where my money was. In '67, I had to pull it out because Johnson got rid of the postal bank. I'm like, that radicalized me too. But it was the '60s. So the movements, I really encountered two different socialist thinkers. One was Murray Bookchin, which he had his sort of eco-anarchist pamphlets circulating. I was very attracted to his vision. And then Hal Draper's Two Souls of Socialism, which explained to me that there was a democratic socialism as well as, the Stalinist authoritarianism and other technocratic forms of authoritarian socialism. And that just clarified for me, I'm now 13, 14, that I'm a socialist. We need an independent working class party committed to peace, justice, freedom, and the environment. So
before we get to the formation of the Green Party, what is interesting is that both you and Sanders both came out of the Socialist Party of America in some sense, where Sanders, was a member of a YPSL chapter. But you were involved in '72 in the Liberty Union campaign with Sanders. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I'm rooting for the Peace and Freedom Party, and that became part of the People's Party. One of the affiliates of the People's Party was the Liberty Union. And I went to Dartmouth College my freshman year. Bernie runs in the fall for the U.S. Senate in a special election, and then, in the spring, and then in the fall for governor of Vermont on behalf of the Liberty Union Party. So I was getting his leaflets and handing them out on the Vermont side of the Connecticut River back then. And, got to know him a little bit. And he had a Eugene Debs slideshow after he left the Liberty Union Party, and I arranged showings of that. So I wasn't part of the Socialist Party of America, but when the Debs caucus, which was the caucus committed to independent politics and was against the war in Vietnam, constituted the Socialist Party USA, I and a lot of other people that wanted unity on the left, we said, let's all join. We were People's Party people. We said, let's join the Socialist Party and the New American Movement, which the biggest part eventually went into DSA. So that's how I got involved with the Socialist Party back then. And so
a lot of these independent runs, though, in the 70s and 80s, but there's a need, I guess, or a movement to build some sort of national left of center third party. And that's where the momentum for a Green Party came about in the early 80s.
Yeah, I think the Green Party was the political expression of what we called the New Left back in the 60s. There were early efforts, Peace and Freedom, People's Citizens Party, Barry Commoner, most prominent environmental scientist. And when I was invited to that first National Green meeting, my message was, we got to build this from the bottom up. We can't build it out of a presidential campaign. We need to go out, organize local groups, get involved in local politics, and build a base. And we proceeded to do that. And so for the next dozen years, that's what we did. And by the time Ralph Nader let us use his name in '96, he didn't actively campaign, we got him on the ballot for president in over 30 states. So then it was all-out campaign in 2000, and we got him on over 40 states. And that's when the Green Party got a national profile from that Nader campaign. So that's how, I've been involved in the Green Party since we started organizing there in '84.
So now, I'm not asking to disparage the Green Party. You're, of course, the standard bearer of the party. You're one of the founders. But how has the success of the Green Party lived up to your expectations? So obviously, no one involved in the Green Party. I've had my share of debates with Green Party people over the years, but nobody's a fool. Everybody knows the barriers up against you, the two-party system, how entrenched it is, and whatnot. And obviously, the Nader campaign was a big level of success, but and there's been some other success at the local level. There was a really competitive races in places like San Francisco and elsewhere. But how is it really measured up? And what's the kind of state of the Green Party as far as number of active members and whatnot? So in other words, obviously you're trying to build the Green Party in your campaign. What's the starting point right now at this relatively early stage in the campaign?
Well, I've been very critical of the Green Party structure and organizing practices. We're still more of a great idea than a real organization. We have survived since '85, and that's the good news. There have been a lot of efforts, a lot better funded than us, about talking about independent politics, whether it was the New Party, which ended up being the Working Families Party, which is really attached to the Democrats, or the Labor Party that Tony Mazzocchi was the inspiration for. Campaign for a New Tomorrow, with Ron Daniels coming out of the Rainbow Coalition. They all came and went, and we're still here. That's the good news. The bad news is, and I think this is true for the whole progressive left social movements. We don't know how to organize. We're activists. We go out and preach. You know, we do a leaflet and we hand it out and say, join us. An organizer, a union organizer, a community organizer knows you don't expand your base that way. You have to go out and listen and learn, make friends, relationships, build trust, and then you can talk about the politics. So that's one of the things we're trying to do with my campaign is teach Green Party activists how to organize. Now, there's a lot of people identify with the Green Party. In the states where you can enroll in the Green Party with the state, there's about 250,000. And that only covers about half the state. So, you know, there's maybe 500,000 people that identify themselves with the Green Party. We got to organize that base so it's better organized. I mean, I've said, and this was an invention of the left in the 19th century, we got to do it like we do in the unions. You know, rich folks aren't going to fund what we're talking about. We got to fund it ourselves. So you need to agree to a set of principles and pay dues to have voting rights and you know, membership privileges in the organization. Otherwise, people flood in and out. And that's one of the problems we have with our social movements. You know, everybody is sort of waiting for orders. They wait online, you know, Move On or whoever's telling them what they got to do next. We don't have local groups where we talk to each other and develop ourselves as speakers and thinkers and writers who can go out in the community and bring more people in. So I think that's the task, and it's a problem with the Green Party, but I see it across the whole left. One of the things coming out of the 60s is we were so successful with the civil rights and anti-war movements in the streets that we said we don't need organizations, we just need to mobilize. And we don't need electoral politics. It took a long time for progressives and socialists to even think about electoral politics. You know, Jesse Jackson brought some back in, and Bernie Sanders brought a lot more back in, but it took a long time. And I think we threw the baby out with the bathwater because the old left, they knew how to organize, and the new left kind of lost some of that.
Yeah, we went from agitate, organize, educate to just agitate, 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 you know, as we grew weaker institutionally. But let's talk about the Sanders campaign. So obviously you and Sanders had a divergence. I don't mean a personal divergence or anything. I just mean in terms of tactics. Sanders started off as someone pursuing third-party politics. He was in a state, Vermont, where it was more viable to actually win certain competitive elections, like in Burlington, his congressional seat, his Senate seat, were all won as independents. You know, he had broken with the Liberty Union Party, which we don't have to get into years prior. But we're seeing now in the last 5 years, obviously, a big resurgence in democratic socialism, in part rooted in the success of the Sanders campaign. But of course, he was pursuing a set of tactics very different than the set of tactics being pursued by yourself in your very inspiring runs for governor in New York and elsewhere. So what did you make of the Sanders phenomenon, which on the one hand popularized socialism, on the other hand, do you have fears that it led more people in the Democratic Party? You know, where do you come across? You come out on the balance sheet of the Sanders half decade?
Oh, I was going to go back to the 80s when he first got elected to mayor.
Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that?
Okay, yeah. He won by 10 votes. It was a surprise. The Democratic machine was caught off guard. Bernie's a great campaigner. I consider him a model. You know, people say he always says the same thing. And that's good because the message is clear. And the people that have heard it before, they want to hear it again because they like it. And I think that's one thing I've learned. I watched him in Vermont. He would talk to everybody, go to towns. I don't think Vermont was that right for a third party. I think Bernie Sanders is such a good candidate. You know, Republicans will say, yeah, we don't agree with Bernie. And he calls himself a socialist, but it's like some people are Catholics and some people are Baptists and some people are Lutherans. They said, well, yeah, that's what Bernie, but we know Bernie's for the people and he'll talk straight to us. And so he won over a lot of those people. You know, there've been a lot of people that have moved up to Vermont who are more like him and his Brooklyn background, particularly in Burlington. But, you know, in Burlington, one of his base was the old working class in the north end of Burlington. So that, you know, that I admired. The Greens, we clashed heads with them on some environmental issues, on a Gatling gun factory, you know, peace movement luminaries like Dave Dellinger and Grace Paley and Murray Bookchin and, you know, a couple thousand of their closest friends. You know, we wanted to convert that plant. And Bernie was on the other side saying we were anti-worker, which was ridiculous because a lot of us were workers. So we, you know, had clashed on the issues. But I think, you know, when he got into Congress, I think he cut a deal with the Vermont Democrats. He said, look, if you let me win this seat, I'll keep the progressives out of some of the races you care about. And so they've had this kind of quid pro quo going on for a long time up there. And as he's, made his peace with the Democratic Party, he really was in the 70s a Debsian socialist. He's about social ownership of the means of production, not just taxing the rich to fund social programs, which is the New Deal liberalism, which I think he more represents now. He talks more about FDR than he does Debs. So I think there's a divergence there. And all the programs he talks about, Medicare for all, his Green New Deal was the only serious one among any Democratic candidates for president. The tax the rich programs, fund tuition-free public college, all that's good. The problem is if you don't socialize the major means of production, the billionaire class stays intact, and that concentrated economic political power translates into concentrated political power, and they can resist and roll back your social programs. So in order to have real political democracy, we got to have a socialist economic democracy.
But one thing that I would say in Bernie's defense is obviously among socialists trying to build an opposition movement, train, cadre, whatever, however you want to put it, it makes sense to talk about this history, to talk about what our vision of a world after capitalism looks like. How do we install forms of worker ownership? How we, to use the old language, how we socialize the commanding heights of the economy. All these things are really important. I think from Bernie's standpoint, it's less clear there was a repudiation of some of those things in the abstract, so much as a reframing of what he thought his purpose was. He thought that, well, first of all, if you have a movement, a class movement that is so weak that it can't win Medicare for all or a Green New Deal, then it probably doesn't have the social power to put on the table questions of, ownership of the means of production. So I think, in other words, it's less clear to me that Bernie has fallen completely into New Deal liberalism and repudiated that fact. Actually, right now in about an hour and a half or an hour, he's doing a talk about that movie on Deb. So he's maybe recovering some of the lost spirit. But in other words, I think that the main issue that we can be certain of is this tactical issue, which boils down to the old independent political action, right? Do working people in the U.S. need their own party, or can we try to carve out space for politics within the Democratic Party? And there's that old debate where it's clear that Sanders is behind a vision of realigning the Democratic Party, storming the party, remaking it into a party that could represent working class interests. Given the constraints of the two-party system, we think that's the most viable route. You hold on to this old Debsian tradition within the American left, which is we need to build a party of working people. We need to reach all the people alienated from both major parties. We need to reach a lot of the working class people, particularly people of color that are stuck in the Democratic Party, because they know how bad the Republicans are and whatever else. So that's what you stand for. But I'd be curious to hear what you make of the attempts of those of us in DSA and others who are kind of trying to chart a middle ground, which is running combative class struggle candidates, but often deciding to do it in Democratic primaries in cities like New York or other places where we think we could win those primaries, but we wouldn't stand a chance in a general election, given how partisan, a lot of working class people's voting alignments are in those areas. What do you make of that strategy in general? Are you more ambivalent? Are you opposed to it? How would you frame it? I'm thinking in particular of someone like Jabari Brisport, who I'll be voting for tomorrow in New York for a state Senate seat, and he previously had run for a council seat as a Green this time around, despite I think not changing any of his ideas and sharing, in particular, a deep appreciation for you, Howie. He's decided to run in the Democratic primary this time.
Well, I agree that I don't think Bernie, deep in his heart and his head, his view has changed that much. But when you confuse the programs he's talking about with democratic socialism, it dilutes what we're talking about when we talk about democratic socialism. As far as the tactic of independent politics, I consider it a principle. Marx and Engels, that was the lesson they drew from the revolution of 1848. Working class people, if we get into parties that are coalitions with the professional, managerial, and small business classes, or even the big business classes, we're going to be in the caboose, and our demands are not going to be met. And I think that's the whole history of the left going into the Democratic Party since the populist movement. They go in to change the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party changes them. You know, look at AOC. Just as Democrats helped her get elected, and now they got 8 candidates. She's only endorsed 2 that are running against the very conservative Democrats. She's not helping those others. She's adapting to her situation, and that's a problem. The left needs a clear identity because we're talking about fundamental change. We need our independent voice, identity, and program. And when progressives and socialists go in the Democratic Party, you know, the establishment loves that. They want you progressives to make speeches. You draw people in. But when it comes to making decisions, it's the corporate Democrats that make the decisions. And I think that's what we've seen with the 2 Sanders runs. That's what we've seen with issues like Medicare for all. You know, Pelosi and Schumer don't even want to talk about that. You know, when it came up under Obama, John Conyers couldn't even get to speak to the hearing because the establishment didn't even want it to be heard. That's the real nature of the Democratic Party. And if you don't, after the primary and you lose, support the corporate Democrat, you're ostracized. You don't have any role in the Democratic Party. They don't want you. So, you know, if you're a radical and you want fundamental change, you might as well organize a party that's for that and let it speak for itself. And the last point I'll make, you don't need the Democratic Party to get elected. Bernie Sanders showed that. I got 48% here in this, you know, it's a Democratic machine here in the city. In a mostly black district, it was actually black Democrats got me to run for that district seat. And I had the whole damn state Democratic Party against me. The working families sent up like 20 people. And their organizers said, we'd rather see a Tea Party Republican than the Green Party guy get elected. And even then, I got 48% of the vote. You know, Jabari could win as a Green. It really matters when you get out there and the people know who you are. That's what Bernie did in Vermont. That's what I did in this district. They'll vote for you. Yeah, people of color, working class people, they vote Democrat because they scared to death of the Republicans who look like the Ku Klux Klan. But most people, when they go in and vote, they go for the label because they don't really know the candidates. If you're on a campaign where people know you and know what you stand for, and you have a track record and they trust you, they're going to vote for you. You don't have to go in the Democratic Party to win. We have 129 Greens around the country elected. You know, it's kind of the best kept secret in American politics. But I think that's a drop in the bucket. We should be electing thousands as we go into the 2020s because there's 500,000 elected offices in this country. And a lot of them are in one-party districts due to gerrymandering. The Green Party can be the second party right off the bat because in the rural districts that are Republican, the Democrats don't run serious candidates, and in the urban districts, the Republicans don't run serious candidates. And when the Democrats and Republicans run in their one-party districts, they don't run on issues. You know, they run on, I grew up here, I'm in the Rotary Club, y'all know me, that kind of stuff. Greens come in there and we really disrupt things because we bring up issues.
So I think there's 2 counters I could give. One is that I agree with you as far as, well, AOC I won't get into because I'm still somewhat an apologist for AOC, or at least I think that we can, in fact, still, it's still unwritten, AOC's trajectory. Of course, there's promising signs and there's worrying signs too. But when we think about this current crop of socialist insurgents in the Democratic Party, I think you bring up a really important counterpoint, which is that there is no mechanism to hold these people accountable. So in other words, they could use DSA volunteers. They could use the immediate media buzz of these organizations. And there's no way to hold them accountable unless there is some sort of actual organizational presence. So with the strategy that I really would like to see pursued is, in fact, just a strategy in theory. You know, in practice, Justice Democrat-style candidates that are running to realign the Democratic Party, that aren't running to be independent working-class voices trying to disrupt and eventually break the 2-party system, or build, at least even in theory, build an alternative party system, you know, are in fact the majority. So for me, the real question is, can we, even as running candidates, sometimes as independents, sometimes on the Democratic Party ballot line, sometimes on the Republican ballot line, sometimes on the Green ballot line, can we run candidates that have a unified identity as socialists that would be held to some sort of for lack of a better word, party discipline that can be organized in such a way that they can check the box of independent political action. And so far, that's just a theory, just like it's just a theory, to be honest, that we can make a third party that can do that. You know, both political strategies have failed. I guess you could say that my strategy has never succeeded, whereas at the very least, the third party strategy worked in the formation of the Republican Party and in the lead up to the Civil War and the end of abolition. But I did want to get to this question of what's the concrete aim of this presidential election. So the thing I joked with you before is that every single regular bourgeois politician, no matter what their chance of actually winning, would just say, "I'm in it to win it." But I was hoping you would give me a different answer. Maybe what's the target? What do you want to do? How do you measure success as a independent left-wing candidate?
Well, if I do win, I will serve. But I don't expect to win, but I expect to advance both on the issues and party building. I think one goal that we can definitely achieve is 1 million votes for socialism. We've never done that in this country. Debs came close twice. The last time was 100 years ago, 1920. I think in 2020, me and my running mate, Angela Walker, who's a lifelong socialist, she was the Socialist Party's vice presidential candidate in 2016 and had run as an independent socialist for sheriff of Milwaukee. I think we can get 1 million votes for socialism, and that would count for something. That would say socialism is back. And then in every state, well, there are about 40 of the 50 states, what the presidential vote is determines whether you have a ballot line for the next election cycle. In most states, that's 1%, 2%, or 3%. In New York now, it's 2% or 135,000 votes, whichever is greater, which this year is going to be 160,000. That's because the Democrats tripled the amount of votes we needed and doubled the frequency we have to get them. Used to be 50,000 votes every 4 years for governor. Now it's every 2 years, governor, president, governor. And if we lose the ballot line, we got to get 3 times as many signatures to get on as an independent. Instead of 15,000 signatures in 6 weeks, we got to get 45,000. So that's your Democratic Party for you. It's not too damn democratic. But so it depends on the state. I know Kentucky, it's 2%. We get a ballot line for 2%. Rhode Island is 5%. New Mexico, it's 0.5%. Alabama, it's 20%. That's going to be a tough one. So that's another goal. So in every state, we have plans. Another benchmark, if we reached 5%, the Federal Election Commission would then define us as a minor party. And that means we would get a prorated portion of the full allotment that major parties get, which are parties with 25% more of the vote or more of the vote. And that's about $100 million for the general election. Now, the capitalist parties don't take that money anymore. The last one to do it was McCain. Obama declined it because they could raise more money privately from the corporate interests and the rich folks. But for us, that would be double-digit millions for our 2024 general election campaign. So that's another benchmark we'd like to reach.
So why do these parties decline the federal money, by the way? Does it come with strings attached or something
Yeah,
like that?
if you take the public money, you can't spend private money.
Right.
So in this election, of all the candidates and all the parties, I'm the only one qualifying for federal primary matching funds. And to do that, you need to raise $5,000 in 20 states and contributions of $250 or less from individuals. And if you accept that money, you can't spend more than $50 million on your primaries. And that's not enough for the capitalist candidates. But for us, it's more than we can raise. So we'll take the primary matching funds. So that's another benchmark. We achieve that it gives us some credibility with the media. And so we sort of have a set of goals. We don't have one particular goal, and I can't predict a number. But the only thing I can say is the more we get, the better, because the more leverage we'll have going forward.
So as part of the Green Party strategy, I guess, is to build up enough and I'm just making this up, so correct me. Is it to build up enough critical mass to the point that you could force electoral reform? Because it does seem like early on, through no fault of your own, just because of the way our election system is set up, you have to spend all this effort, all this organizing resources on getting ballot lines and maintaining ballot lines. And that's resources that you're not spending on advertisements, you're not spending on other things. So is there an intermediary step where you feel like electoral reform is necessary to actually catapult the Green Party to that major party status? And also, finally, I would like you to go back a little bit more in detail to what happened after that Nader moment, and why didn't that moment translate into something? Because it does seem like the Green Party is back to where it was in maybe '96, and that there wasn't the cumulative effect after the big Nader success in 2000.
Well, the reaction to Nader post 2000, basically the liberals in the Green Party that were disappointed in Clinton and Gore, their friends in, the Sierra Club and Peace Action were giving them a hard time. And, they basically left. So that actually moved the Green Party to the left. So the people that stayed were the more radical elements. And the Green Party now calls itself a party committed to ecological socialism. And that was put in the platform in 2016. So that is a consequence of that sort of winnowing out of who was in the Green Party and really committed to it for the long haul. I would say we're much stronger than we were in '96. We have ballot lines. We have parties that have been, consistently active for now, a few decades. And they have, we have, like I said, we got 129 people elected around the country. They are forces in their communities. We have a member of the Minneapolis City Council who's been working on this police brutality issue, and now he's got leverage. And those other Democrats know, if we don't get on board with this, maybe some other Greens are going to take our seats. So, we are much stronger than we were then, but we've been kind of at a plateau. And as far as electoral reform goes, look, we've been winning it. I mean, Greens have been instrumental in a lot of the places where we now have ranked choice voting. There are 23 cities and counties. And in Maine, we have it for all the elections, including the presidential electors. And as they used to say 100 years ago, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. I say instant runoff voting is an idea whose time has come. And in the presidential election, of course, the first question I get asked by the media is, why are you going to spoil it for Joe Biden? And I say, no, the Democrats and Joe Biden are spoiling it for themselves. Because since Nader, we've been giving them the answer to that problem of the spoiler. Get rid of the Electoral College and have a ranked choice national popular vote for president. And, Joe Biden's welcome to take that. He can try to convince people he really means it. But if they're worried about the spoiler question, then take it on. Find a solution. It's a proven nonpartisan solution. But instead, they act like the Green Party is the difference between them and victory. If they get their base out, they should crush Trump. Trump is toast. I mean, this guy, look at all the things he lost in the last week. I've been calling him a loser. I mean, over the weekend, it was the TikTok and K-pop teens. They bamboozled and beat him. And coronavirus, I mean, it's pathetic. I mean, the guy's given up. He says, coronavirus wins, I'm out of here. He's a loser. And I think people are beginning to see that. So if Biden can't beat this guy, we got economic depression. We got tens of thousands of people dying from this pandemic that Trump doesn't know what to do with. And everybody knows it's like Nixon. How do you know when he's lying? His lips are moving. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are seeing that.
So one question that I do have is the Green Party is obviously a far more left-wing party than many of the parties around the world that came out of the green movement that carry this language, in part because, in our undemocratic electoral system, a lot of the more liberal elements are, like you said, very quickly defected back to the Democratic Party. Now, my question would be, one, do you think the Green Party needs to have some sort of structural connection with the labor movement built over the years to prevent the transformation of many Green parties in Europe, including very radical ones like the German Green Party, into parties of the middle class, into more conservative parties that are in many cases now back to the right of historic social democracy?
Yeah, well, the difference is the working class is not in any party in this country. First of all, the Democrats and Republicans are memberless parties. I mean, it's not like you go to the local chapter of your Democratic Party because you got an issue with affordable housing. They don't do that. You form a single issue group and work on it that way. We need a real party of the left where we bring the issues and the constituencies together, develop a common platform, and support each other on all these issues. And that's how that goes back to the question of accountability. If you have an active membership, the people you appoint as candidates and party leaders, if you have active membership, they got to answer to it. In the Democratic Party, in the primaries, everybody's atomized. They're not local organizations they're part of. They don't talk to each other. They get advertised at by the candidates that got invested in by the money. And so that's a different kind of party structure.
So you're trying to create, in other words, the first membership party in modern U.S. history, a party where the candidates are accountable to a base, where the members have to agree to certain statements of principles and so on. Is that right?
I would say the second. I think the Socialist Party, until the mid-30s, was a small mass party, 100,000 members. And, they would get nearly 1 million votes. I mean, Norman Thomas in 32 got, I think it was about 800,000 votes. So it's been done. And that party was a membership party. And that's what we need to recover. That is an invention of the left. That's the only way we can compete. All of us got to pitch in. Same way we have unions. We pay dues so we can have, representation. As far as the structural relationship to labor, the problem with the unions, I mean, I was a Teamster for a long time. I've been in unions all my life, is that the bureaucracy is detached from the membership. Partly, I think, because it's the automatic dues checkoff when you get your contract and they get the money. In the old days, they had to go around and collect the dues. The stewards had to go around and collect the dues, and people could well, what about my grievance? Or, what do you, they wouldn't give them the money right away till they got some accountability. That detachment means labor has been, when they want to fight politically or fight the boss, they do a corporate campaign, a PR campaign. They don't organize the power of their members in things that they really have power, like their labor, withholding it, a strike. And then politically, they give money to the Democrats who say, thank you very much, and give them lip service, like on card check, like Obama did twice, and after the election, later for labor. So the real problem is to get working class people engaged. And it goes back to the organizing I was talking about earlier. We got to have a party that goes out and talks to working class people. And actually, I believe until we have a left party like that, we're not going to get the labor movement, the unions, with a few exceptions, to the point where they rely on the members' power and they organize the members. And it's not a bureaucracy that's, more comfortable going to golf with the supervisors of the company or the politicians instead of with their own members.
That's a long dream of the U.S. left. It's a thwarted ambition to have a labor party. Howie, we have some tactical disagreements, but I'm glad to see we are both pursuing the same ends. I'm sure all of our viewers are too. Thank you so much for taking the time. Best of luck with the campaigning, and I'm sure I'll talk to you before the campaign is over. But thanks again for joining us and for all of your time.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to come back and talk some more.
All right. Well, everyone.
Mm-hmm.